Good morning to the Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, online viewers, radio listeners via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM and respective radio stations island-wide. I'm Relika Roach and welcome to the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, September 9th, 2020. At this time, I would like to invite the Minister of Justice, the Honorable Anna Richardson, to address you. Minister Richardson, you have the floor.
Good morning, Prime Minister, colleague ministers, members of the press, Ms. Roach, and the listening and viewing public. This morning, I'd like to give an update on the activities of the Ministry of Justice over the past week. Firstly, I'd like to say congratulations to the members of Parliament on the opening of the 2020 parliamentary year. And it was successfully a virtual ceremony that was flawlessly executed yesterday, with His Excellency Governor Holliday delivering an exceptional national address. I'd like to bid the 15 honorable members of Parliament a successful year, and I look forward to a progressive and productive parliamentary year, as well as a bipartisan relationship, as only together we can move St. Martin forward. On Friday, September 4th, 2020, the Project Group Function Book Ministry of Justice was established by ministerial decree. During a small ceremonial moment, the minister responsible for all government-related human resources matters, Minister of General Affairs, the Honorable Prime Minister Sylveria Jacobs, signed the ministerial decree laying the legal basis for the project group. As a reminder, the project group is tasked with the implementation of a new function book for the entire Ministry of Justice and to update the legal position of the police department. The project group is comprised of a steering committee and a work group with representatives from the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of General Affairs, and the Ministry of Finance. The combination of ministers and secretary generals in the steering committee will ensure progress on all levels of government. Moreover, the work group will be supported by the other personnel and external expertise depending on the phase in the process. During the monumental meeting last Friday, the steering committee and work group were briefed on their roles and responsibilities to further advance the process. Having established the project group with a work group dedicated to meeting the deadlines is a definite milestone for our justice workers, and we expect to complete a significant aspect of the function books by or before the end of the year. Completion and implementation of the function books remains among my top 5 priorities as Minister of Justice. In closing, the community of St. Martin is encouraged to stay informed, practice good hygiene, and be aware and be prepared, and continue to take measures to slow the spread of COVID-19. As a community, we are in this together and we will get through this together. Thank you for your attention, and I remain available for any questions the press may have. Thank you, Relika.
Thank you, Minister Richardson, for your opening remarks. At this time, I would like to invite the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Artwell Edion, to address you. Minister Edion, you have the floor.
Good morning, Relika, to my fellow ministers, the media, and all of you tuning into this press briefing. In regard to the SRP, a total of 559 companies have applied for the June Business Bureau support, and payments have begun. For unemployment and income support, there have been 325 applications already paid out. The SMDF is continuing to screen applications they have received and are cross-referencing them with SAB to avoid duplicates. For those that are signing up to the SRP Unemployment and Income Support Program, I would like to remind you that the deadline is September 15th. I've also pinned a video on my Facebook page, and also it's supposed to be at least uploaded on the page of the government to those of you having problems or a hard time understanding how to use the portal. There's a step-by-step tutorial to walk you through the process. That'll be all, Relika.
Thank you, Minister Edion, for your opening remarks. At this time, I would like to invite the Minister of Public Health, Social Development and Labor, the Honorable Richard Panafleck, to address you. Minister Panafleck, you have the floor.
Thank you, Zuleika. Good morning to the members of the media, the Prime Minister, my esteemed colleagues, the Council of Ministers, and the people of St. Martin. As of yesterday, September 8th, the Ministry of VSR was informed that our active cases has increased to 187 cases. We now have a total of 527 confirmed cases on Dutch St. Martin since the beginning. 6 patients are currently hospitalized and 1 patient is isolated and being monitored. Of the active cases, CPS are monitoring 180 people in home isolation. The number of people recovered since first case surfaced on St. Martin in March of 2020 has increased to 321. 99 people are now in quarantine based on contact trace investigation. To further control the spread of the virus, CPS has tested 909 travelers arriving in Princess Juliana International Airport and 1,668 people throughout the community. We are working towards our goal of 0 active cases. However, we can only achieve this if we all work together and adhere to the guidelines. We must do by working together to find a workable balance between safeguarding the health of all the people and the economical effects that the pandemic is bringing to the island. I would like to give some figures from the report received last from the Collective Prevention Services. It's a summary. As of the 3rd week of July 2020, St. Martin has been a drastic increase in the number of confirmed COVID cases. Source and contact tracing investigation indicated that the majority of cases linked to contacts of confirmed cases. Large clusters of cases have been linked to nightlife settings and places of work, indicating that St. Martin is experiencing local community transmission. So far, the number of hospitalizations and deaths in the second wave is significantly lower than experienced in the first wave. Since the 3rd week of August 2020, we are seeing a decreased trend in the number of cases that are reported by day. However, it is too early to conclude whether this trend was sustained. As you can know by now, the last couple of days we were in single digit, and yesterday there was a jump again in double digit. I will give extensive detailed briefing on the report on a later date concerning the report received, and to inform the people and giving them the figures of how the situation was in the last couple of days. In conclusion, I want to say, avoid mass gatherings. Wear your mask whenever you leave your house, when you have to leave your house. Practice social distancing. Use hand sanitizer and wash your hands with soap as often as possible. Like I said before, and like everybody is telling you, it's only with your own part of actively keeping yourself healthy that we can reach the goal of lowering the active cases. I want to thank you.
Thank you, Minister Panafleck, for your opening remarks. At this time, I would like to invite the Minister of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Transport, and Telecommunication, the Honorable Ludmila De Wever, to address you. Minister De Wever, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Roach. Good morning, Honorable Prime Minister, colleague ministers, members of the press, Ms. Roach, and the listening and viewing public. This morning, in providing an update on the activities of the past week for the Ministry of TEAD, I'd like to start with the tour of the boardwalk in preparation of beach maintenance and the upcoming season. On Monday, September 7th, I took a tour, I organized a tour of the boardwalk with the Tourism Bureau, representatives of the Ministry of ROMI, as well as the Ministry of Justice via the police force that's responsible for Phillipsburg area, as well as members of the cabinet. The general public is reminded that it is restricted to park vehicles on the boardwalk, and this will result in cars being towed. The purpose of this tour was to take an assessment of the current conditions on the boardwalk as well as on the beach. Part of this assessment resulted in a very lengthy list of plans that will take place over the next 2 months in preparation of the season, and notification will be going out to all the vendors of the beach to temporarily remove the structures on the beach in order to have the beach maintenance. There are certain parts of the boardwalk where the sand is higher than the boardwalk, and this needs to be leveled off. This is why we will be organizing a meeting with the vendors to provide them with the information and give them ample time, possibly about 2 weeks, to remove everything prior to this cleaning taking place. In addition to that, plans will be put in place for adding in more benches, removing of trash that has been there for quite some time, as well as implementing or placing garbage bins on the beach as well. Last week, Friday, on September 4th, we held a meeting with the Simpson Bay Marketplace vendors to clearly address the concerns brought forth by those vendors. These concerns range from management and the setup of the utilities, health guidelines, restroom maintenance, and allocation of addresses to joint inspections with the Ministry of ROMI. That's on September 17th. Present during this meeting were representatives again from the Department of ROMI, Public Health, the Fire Department, and Utilities Company, GB. There was a temporary ministerial decree instituted after Hurricane Irma and Maria for the use of generators for the vendors. This decree was renewed in February 2020 for an additional 2 years. However, the current existing issues were not addressed in the extension. After handling these concerns last week, we have now put in plans in place to have running water, as well as the vendors being allowed to pay for electricity once the utility meters are installed. In regards to the inspectorate of the Ministry of TEAT, and has already been placed, but I would like to remind the public that due to circumstances related to COVID-19, the theoretical driving exams are suspended until September 21st. This administering of practical driving exams will continue. The administering, of practical driving exams will continue as normal. Those candidates impacted by this will be contacted by the department if they already haven't been, and we apologize for any inconvenience this may cause. In regards to the travel information guide being prepared by the Tourist Bureau, this is being updated for as a destination guide for all the activities on the island that will be available as well from now and as we get into the high season. I am very hopeful and positive that if all of the preparations are in place, that we are going to see a high season and a decent season to make up for COVID-19's pressure and losses. And as an additional reminder for businesses to follow the guidelines that have been set in place, it is never being said enough that we remind everyone that they have to continue practicing social distance, wearing a mask, washing their hands frequently. As businesses start to open more and more, this is important for us to keep in mind in order to mitigate our spread of COVID-19, in order to minimize our capacity reaching capacity at the hospital, as well as ensuring that we are ready to get back to our regular activities as much as possible. I would like to thank the Minister of ROMI, as well as the Minister of Justice, for allowing us to continue this cooperation and coordination of activities as we get St. Martin back on track. Yesterday, I also mentioned to the Minister that the island is looking cleaner, which is a good thing, and that's what we need to remind the public, that it's not just for our visitors, it's predominantly for ourselves to keep this island clean. That's how we sell our island. The cleaner it is, the better it is. As well, I would like to take the opportunity now to extend my condolences to the family of Mr. Melvin James, as well as Michelle Hodge, for their passing over these last few days. Thank you very much for your attention, and I am available for any questions.
Thank you, Minister DeWeaver, for your opening remarks. At this time, I would like to invite the Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, the Honorable Silvera Jacobs, to address you. Prime Minister Jacobs, you have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Rolika. Thank you. Good morning to my colleague ministers, members of the press, to you, Ms. Roach, and of course to the listening and viewing public. I'd like to update the general public that on Monday, September 7th, I had 2 meetings related to border controls, or they were telephone meetings, of course, seeing our new situation and the absence of the prefect from the island, who is in France at the moment, related to the border closures. I had a discussion with her related to the projections. I know that she had attempted or had put September 1st and now September 15th. And it appears that they're looking again at extending such. I expressed the concerns of St. Martin in the continued border controls. The prefect still had to get back in touch with her Minister of Overseas as well as the ARS director in Guadeloupe, as even though she admitted that the COVID-19 cases were diminishing, that she's still taking advice from the main advice from the health perspective. As much as we highlighted several areas where the movement of persons, if it's for other reasons than for COVID, that should be discussed. That was not further explored, and I am still awaiting an update from the prefect in this regard. As a result, I also spoke to our Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Dutch Minister, Stef Blok, also highlighting that the concerns of the Dutch population where the border controls are continuing. With the both conversations, the synchronization of our protocols and guidelines is what St. Martin is more focused on. And I look forward to hearing from both individuals, as our Foreign Affairs Minister did give positive feedback that he would further initiate dialogue on a national and political level to assist in seeing how we could get a faster movement on the reopening of our internal borders. Of course, our health sector is giving advice in this regard as well. And as the week progresses, I hope to be able to further update the public of St. Martin as we do see the concern of the population and the negative impacts it is having on both sides. Further to the, what is very much at the top of our priority is dealing with the second tranche liquidity support discussions with our Kingdom partners. I continue to have discussions also with Prime Ministers of Aruba and Curacao. Each island has their own, let's say, individual challenges, but as 3 countries, we are all in agreement, as well as our parliaments, that the manner in which we continue to be handled is definitely not conducive. Whilst I've received several letters internally about continuing to communicate, the communication stop is not on the side of St. Martin. However, in my recent discussion with the State Secretary on Saturday, he reiterated that it is based on the Kingdom Council of Ministers' decision that he does not negotiate further with St. Martin until we've met the needs that they have put forth for the second tranche. He continued to reiterate as well that he's not stepping back or stepping forward to further discuss our proposal, that the proposal that he will be discussing is still that of July 10th. My Prime Minister colleagues in Aruba and Curacao, despite all the discussions and the negotiations that they claim to be having with those 2 countries, also is getting the same response. And so as countries, we are really appealing to the Dutch government, as well as the Second Chamber Parliament, to see it important to separate the crisis liquidity support from any discussion related to the reforms. As countries, we are all seeing it as extremely important to move forward with the reforms, but not to do so under duress, not to do so with the conditions being placed for crisis liquidity support. I believe the Minister of Finance updated already, but he also forwarded the latest updates to the Kingdom via CFT. And as a Council of Ministers, we approved the contents of the latest attempts to meet their conditions. Of course, this will require more discussions with the unions moving forward, and we have also invited them to a meeting to further discuss the challenges we are facing, and hopefully we can come to a consensus with them sooner rather than later in our efforts to be able to secure necessary funding for the people of St. Martin. It remains our priority, and we will continue to dialogue as much as we are allowed to, and continue to lobby also with those who are sympathetic to the cause within the Netherlands and around the world. We have also taken note of course, we submit the highlights to the Governor, His Excellency Eugene Holiday, which came forward in his speech in the opening of Parliament yesterday, and I add my sentiments as the sentiments of the government to what was stated earlier by my colleague, that I look forward to continued collaborative, even though we have a separation of both entities, that together we can move the legislation that needs to be moved. The Ministry of General Affairs is working diligently together with the representative ministries to get the relevant legislation out of government and into the hands of Parliament. But of course, we also look forward to initiative laws coming from Parliament that can assist us in moving forward, especially legislation that would help us to be able to diversify the economy that is so much needed. I've also taken note of some of the statements in the closing of Parliament from some of the faction leaders, and we will take the time to delve a bit deeper into such as the weeks progress. Several important meetings are upcoming this week. For instance, the steering committee held its meeting yesterday and will be meeting with us today. So updates where that is concerned will be forthcoming also during the course of the week. And we have, of course, constant consultations within the ministry as a support of the entire government organization in streamlining our services, in ensuring that the services can continue. As such, guidelines have been sent out to the SGs to be disseminated with their department heads as it relates to working from home and ensuring that we can be as productive as possible, even as we do staggered, having staggered, just like other businesses, that we don't have too many persons in the building at the same time, and encouraging as much as possible working from home. I believe the Minister of Health has already reiterated minimizing mass gatherings. We have definitely seen that that can have a definite effect on mitigating the spread. And I continue to hope and pray that those who are currently suffering with the virus or having any type of symptoms or tested positive are being diligent in ensuring that they can regain full health and return to 100% functioning. Following the guidelines, even if you are not symptomatic, to remain indoors and to isolate. This is very, very important. Our individual behavior will be what determines how quickly we can, let's say, get to a normal whereby most of our services can be given to the general population. The virus continues to spread within our community and within our homes. So it is upon us to be very disciplined in our behavior out there as we as government continue to take the necessary measures. It will be a cooperation between government, organizations, and the people of St. Martin for us to truly get back to flattening the curve. As you know, our agenda has been dominated by the response to the outbreak of the coronavirus, but we cannot lose sight for the long-term development needs of this country. And so trying to multitask on that level is what we as government continue to do. So first, containing the outbreak of the virus, supporting the schools and the business community, trying to prevent as much as possible layoffs and protecting the most vulnerable within our society, and working together to jumpstart the economy, diversifying the economy, and ensuring that the reforms that are so hard needed, that at least the ones that do not require a large injection of funding, can be done as soon as possible, while collaborating with all sectors of our society. I would like to continue to ask persons to look into our National Development Vision, which has been published, the governing program, which will also soon be published, and to remind the people of St. Martin that together we can and we will beat this virus, as well as bring back the hope that we need in terms of, communities working together, those who are more progressive and more, let's say, financially able, helping those who are not, so that we can see true resilience, even though I've heard lately that's an overused word. No one can decide what is overused for us, as long as we continue to stand strong in face of all the challenges that we are currently facing. So I await now from the media present any questions, and of course we will continue to update as the week goes by. Relika?
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs, for your opening remarks. If you've just joined us, you are watching the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, September 9th, 2020. Thank you for joining us. We now move over to the question and answer session. The floor is open, and Lyndon Brown of BCN TV, you have the floor.
Good morning to the people of St. Martin and to the ministers that are present here today. We have a word today, systemic government. And this question statement is going to the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, meaning for 40 years, the government of St. Martin had a systemic way of government. And what the Dutch is saying, there's more, our expenditure is more than our income for some people. And the Dutch is emphasizing, especially government businesses, the salaries are too high. And the Dutch keep on telling us, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. And the Minister of Finance also mentioned dead bodies in government. I would like both of you to weigh in on this matter. Systemic government. In other words, there was an old pattern of doing business. So where it is not balanced. And because of that, it have run the economy of St. Martin in crisis for years. So it is okay to get money, to get input on our economy, but if the systemic government do not change, we are still in a problem. So this is
Minister Edion, Prime Minister.
I believe Lyndon is still speaking.
He was muted.
Oh, sorry. PM?
Hello?
Yes, Lynn.
Yeah, you heard me, or you want me to go over the question?
I heard you. I believe we heard you.
Okay.
You mentioned systematic government and a couple other stuff. I'll try to summarize what I believe your message was. Yes, government has been acting in a certain way financially for the last 10, 20 years, I believe, for as long as the government has existed in St. Martin. And that's also why a lot of change is uncomfortable within the current, at least with this CoM, for certain individuals, because we have come here and certain things we have to clean up. We have to make certain changes. Like I mentioned before, governments in the past have tried to address the matter, for example, with the phone policy and so forth. I've seen current phone bills that were ridiculously high, and it will be uncomfortable again. We are going over to a prepaid system for the most part, and persons that are used to the old way of doing things would not like those things, obviously. We're also looking at, in general, in all aspects of government, on how to reduce our expenditures so that we could stretch a little longer. In my meeting in Parliament a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned the question was posed to me on the government's liquidity, and it was taken out of context a little, I would say. I mentioned that with the current liquidity that we have and the SRP that we are expected to pay, and if we don't address our current expenditure, and also not knowing, especially that September and October are traditionally our very slow months for the hurricane season, the money will finish in October. In the meantime, this government is addressing our expenditure. We have reduced expenditures tremendously. We are looking at income generating measures. And of course, we are still continuing the talks and discussions and planning for liquidity support from the Netherlands. That has not stopped. We are doing what was asked of us, and we are still continuing that process.
Thank you, Minister Edion. Prime Minister, would you like to chime in?
I think the minister clarified it as much as possible in the way the question was asked. I am not responsible for how government has systematically been functioning over the years, and the fact that every time a government tries to implement certain changes, governments in the past have fallen, has also been part of the newness of a status that we had just achieved. So the first 10 years played a role in that. But no one can let go of the fact that by 2017, prior to Hurricane Irma and Maria hitting, St. Martin was well on its way to having 2 balanced budgets and showing a lot of financial discipline. And that is being forgotten in the whole discussion right now. In my opening statements, there were certain things that I had that I decided to just let it go. But since the question is asked, behaviors or the system that we are in is one that has been carbon copied from the Netherlands. So these same types of issues raise their heads in the Netherlands as well. But because we have a very small society, everything is in your face and we have to deal with it, and everyone knows everyone. It is part of the small island situation. However, holding on to certain systems, even as you try to change them, we would like to, for instance, increase minimum wage or decrease cost of living. But the amount of legislation that would have to change, the amount of stakeholders consultations that would have to take place would make that take a very, very long time. And everyone wants everything to change overnight. So I myself have had to temper my patience in how long it takes to make certain changes. And I must say, though, that this government is committed to taking the tough decisions, to make the necessary cuts, to also weed out any and all persons who are not contributing to the development and then move them into a situation where they need to be. I have asked the government, specifically the organization, to assess any and all persons who are not working for whatever reason, and for us to find a solution. So either transfer them into functions if it's a skill set situation, or if it's a not getting along with someone situation, that we resolve these human resource issues so that we can get the most out of our organization. And now that we're working from home, it is now a new assessment that needs, so many of us are working from home then, a new assessment that needs to take place. But one thing I can say for this government is that we are committed to making the tough decisions and to make the necessary changes. Of course, it will require discussions with stakeholders, and so we ask all to remember that we all have the same goal moving forward.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Minister Edion and Lyndon, for that question. I would now like to invite Stephen Cerulean of Page 82 Radio. You have the floor. Stephen, if you can hear us, can you unmute your mic?
Can you hear me, Ms. Roach?
Yes, Stephen, we can. Go ahead.
Good morning to you. Good morning to you, Prime Minister. Good morning to you, ministers, as well as my colleagues. My question is for the Minister of TIAT. During the opening of the new parliamentary year on Tuesday, the governor said that tourism arrivals are estimated to drop by up to 70%, while GDP is projected to decline by 25% in 2020. The contraction in 2020, he said, is expected to be significantly worse than the economic fallout from the effects of Hurricane Irma back in 2017. What are your plans, Minister, to revise the country's economic activities, taking that into consideration?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Cerulean. I'll try and answer as best as I can because I had some issues hearing it all clearly. The parts that I heard was about our economic plans. We have a plan that we are calling a path to economic recovery that is looking at the broader picture of things that have to be improved on, new ideas that have to be implemented, new policies, new new way of working, for instance. And it has taken us a long time to get this plan together, because one of the things we wanted to avoid was combining older plans from Tourism Bureau, Economic Affairs, any other reports such as Central Bank, just making a collection, an amalgamation of all of these reports that at the end of the day really had nothing tangible that we could focus on. So although it has taken us some time, we are nearing the end of it, and it is covering various ministries. Parts of our matrix that we have prepared, when going through it again this week, we saw that some of our activities in the path to economic recovery have already been accomplished. And during this week, I am meeting with fellow peers and members of parliament to start to present the plan before we can go to do a public presentation of it, and it will be available for everyone. But it includes a stricter way of working, in a nutshell, an easier way of working, an efficient way of working. And while the path to economic recovery is not a quick fix for everything that has been ailing this country for a long time, it is a path for us to follow that will take us on a right track, that if we follow it, if we remain consistent, if we enforce the things in it, I do see the light at the end of the tunnel. While it's hard for the public to realize the contents of it, once they get to the path to economic recovery, it will be a lot more understanding and clear for the path that we're on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister DeWeaver and Stephen, for that question. I would now like to invite Bibi Shaw of SMN News. You have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. Rika, I'm having some internet issues, so let me know if you're hearing well. And I'll ask the same for the ministers. Minister of TEAD, Ms. DeWeaver, is there any plans by the ministry to modify or simplify, whichever word you think it's better for you, some of the guidelines for our visiting tourists? The complaints I'm getting from quite a number of people, even from different countries around the world, when they want to come to St. Martin, one of the biggest hiccups or the biggest problems they're having is getting the PCR test just 3 days old. Are there any plans to extend this 3 days to 5 days for the valid PCR testing that shows that a person is negative? Is there any way, that your ministry is working to simplify these guidelines to even get tourists to our island safer, but at least easier?
Thank you, Ms. Hodgshaw. That is a really wonderful and on-point question, because it has been my challenge for the last 2 weeks, going to the Minister of VSA and having this discussion with him to possibly extend it. And we are awaiting the advice to come from the medical professionals of that, because while we're open to specific countries, we are now hindering the being open to certain countries by a restriction in terms of the timeliness of the test. So it is exactly as you said. Some passengers are having an extremely hard time traveling to the island because they don't get their results in time. And what's happening is, in my conversations with the airlines have revealed that the cancellations are happening within 24 hours prior to the person traveling. And because of this data that I received several weeks ago, this is why I started lobbying with the Minister of VSA as well as my peers in the Council of Ministers to see if we can change it, but of course not change it in a vacuum where we're not taking and heeding the advice of the medical professionals that are helping us contain this spread. And the proposal that we are looking at is to increase it from 72 hours to 5, so from 3 days to 5 days. And I am hoping that that would be a possibility that will be approved. One of the ideas that came about was that we would have to, One of the challenges that we have faced is that we were trying to make sure we worked in line, in cooperation with our French neighbors, with the French side of the island, which is why we were trying to match our restrictions and guidelines. As such, the 72-hour window was one of those items that matched. But we are further being pressured and by the fact that people aren't able to do it, especially with the way that it's working in the US. So that's why we've had to sort of think outside of the box and see if this is happening. And one of the ideas that came from the French side is that they do secondary testing after 7 days. And we are now looking into doing secondary testing after on day 8. So to counter the 5 days and then with the secondary testing on day 8. That has not yet been approved, but it's on the table for discussion, as well as the possibility of increasing our ability to test at the airport once the high season starts. But that has to be done in collaboration with the airport. Once we have finished those talks to see whether or not that healthcare facility for testing will be available at the airport at the start of the high season, which should be in November. That's why it's important now for the months of September and October for us to work on these plans, along with the cleanup of the boardwalk and the Bayside and Great Bay, and also continue our conversations with the airlines, because the good news is the airlines, for instance, today I spoke to Air France, and the Air France are upping their flights, increasing their flights from 5 to 7 starting October. So we are getting positive news, and that's what I want to tell the public. The airlines, they are preparing for an increase in the season. They've already confirmed their schedules, which is why we need to focus right now on getting our island ready, preparing it, making sure that the public, the world knows that we're safe to receive people for the high season. That I am certain will be there. Thank you very much.
Just to follow up, Minister DeWeaver, how soon do you expect the medical board or the advisors to come up with some information so that we can get this on time for the beginning of the high season?
Thank you for the follow-up. Actually, so we did receive some partial advice that is not related exactly to the increase in the days. We're expecting it today because we have another Council of Ministers meeting tomorrow to discuss this further. And that is it. Thank you. Oh, sorry. One more thing. That's why I was like, I know I had something. Sorry about that. What I do want to clarify is that the minute we do get this information, it can be immediately implemented because the airlines need a minimum of at least 2 weeks notification. So to get it back in their system and up and running. So we need to do a mass marketing to allow them time to prepare. So if it's earlier than 2 weeks, that's fine, that works. But our ideal thing is we would like to do it as fast as possible. It's just that the airlines do need some time to prep as well and to MATIC to be updated. So that might be less than 2 weeks. Normally what we work with is a 2 week time span. Thanks, Ms. Hodgshaw.
Thank you, Mr. DeWeaver. Thank you, BB, for the question. I would now like to invite Jeffrey, Dr. Sock-Sockran of Island 92 Radio. You have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Relika. Good morning to the Prime Minister and all of the ministers that are here this morning. This is kind of I think, a sensitive subject for those folks in the business community. To a certain degree, people are urgently, fighting for their very survival. Their very survival to keep their business doors open, their very survival to be able to pay their employees, their very survival just to keep things going. And when we listen to all of the talk and a lot of the rhetoric and things that we're doing and the discussions that we're having, I walk away week after week saying, well, what's the plan and when can we start to see results of the plan? It seems like there isn't this urgency to work things out with the Netherlands. It seems like that we want to keep having discussions and discussions and discussions, but we need to get to the finish line because the urgency in the business community, the very survival of the businesses and all of the employees that work for these businesses on our island, it is in jeopardy. So how are we going to increase the urgency, and how are we going to move this forward in a faster manner? And I don't know if the Prime Minister wants to address it. I don't know if the Minister of Finance would like to address, but it just seems to me that we need a sense of urgency, and we need to move this forward with a concrete plan where businesses can see steps and progress and know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you.
Minister of Finance, you want to start?
Okay, I'll start. I believe the Minister of TIA just alluded to her economic recovery plan, and that it should be with the members of Parliament shortly, and then will be released to the public. So that, I believe, answers part of that question. When it comes to the sense of urgency with the Netherlands, I believe there's never not a sense of urgency when it comes to the Ministry of Finance, for sure. Up to last night, 7 o'clock, we sent our one of our last documentations to CFD. So the sense of urgency has been here. Discussions have to happen. Discussions have to happen to have the sense of urgency. You have to have discussions to have the plan. And if you look at the other two islands, we're all in the same boat. So, and we're all in the same sense of urgency. Our sister island, Aruba, for example, stated that they have 30 million gigs left for the month of September. I'm pretty sure there's a sense of urgency there. The sense of urgency does not only lie on St. Martin. The sense of urgency also lies on the Netherlands. We've expressed our urgency, we've expressed our concerns, and like I mentioned before, we're working diligently and on the process.
Thank you, Minister of Finance. A lot of when Dr. Fox, sorry, good morning to you. I understand your sentiments and that of the business community, that of the general public, because I think many have lost sight of the fact that from day one, we have been in very constant discussions with the Netherlands to be able to secure financing so that we can assist the persons. When people hear, the SSRP, you just throw that name out. But that was a construct that had to be put together, and I must commend the Minister of Finance for, together with his other stakeholders, to get it up and running within a month after the discussion started. As you would know, when we started that, we still didn't get an agreement with the Netherlands on the funding, and we started with funding that had been promised since 2019. And this was one of the points that I did not want to, let's say, underline or underscore. But the fact of the matter is the Netherlands have not lived up to its obligation to us. When we subscribed to when we put forth a bond, which we did in 2019, under the approved budget of 2019 and never received it, that put us in a hole to be able to make necessary investments. They also did not want to give the last part of the liquidity support necessary for 2019 based on the pension reform and some other reforms. We had great meetings, we negotiated, we were able to get those funds just before COVID hit, or as COVID was becoming an issue here on St. Martin. So that little bit of liquidity that should have been our buffer for the reserves ended up being the first part that we used to be able to supplement salaries, etc. And the discussions that we try to have with our unions to get an agreement early so that it would not hurt, especially the most vulnerable within our civil service and especially within the third parties. So the businesses, the very same businesses you are talking about, that also proved to be something that required much more discussion than we had expected. Even having a provisional agreement, and then there seeming to be a constant back and forth with letters, and up to now refusing to sit and meet. So these are the challenges we are facing. It is not St. Martin that has said we will not have a discussion with the Dutch. As a matter of fact, St. Martin is compiling its landspakketten, the country packages, prioritizing our reforms. We discussed how many already overlap with what had been put forth by the Dutch. We are looking at which ones we can actually carry out to improve life and living on the island without an injection from the Dutch, as a matter of fact. And the ones that were already running, for instance, related to the prison, the ones related to pension, we have finalized the ones for pension. The ones for the prison, the Minister of Justice is working diligently with and trying to secure the promised assistance that the Dutch would give us to bring that forward. What we are asking, and we do not think what we're asking in the discussion with the Dutch, is for us to separate the discussion of what we need for the crisis from what will be spent if and when we agree on what reforms need to happen. And that is something further down the road. But instead, we are being pushed with our backs against the wall, and then persons within the community make the judgment call that we are not trying to meet the Dutch halfway. No, it's the other way around. The Dutch is basically not trying to meet us halfway, and we have lobbied with the second chamber, and there is a meeting of the second chamber probably already started that would be going on this afternoon, where the state secretary would have to answer certain questions, and he did put out a CoM brief yesterday showing where that would go, but he also explains that yes, it would remove some of the autonomy of the parliament and the government, and that political agreement is needed, and then when it goes to the Council of State, it can be discussed. So that's definitely, we continue to push the agenda of St. Martin and its people. The plans are like to roll out our plans, as that was one of the statements also made in his letter. They would assess whether St. Martin still needed the liquidity. Every country around the world is suffering with the economic downturn of COVID-19. So that statement in and of itself separates St. Martin from the other two countries, while all three of us are going through financial trouble at the same time. And though St. Martin, through all reports, have the opportunity to bounce back quicker and has done so, that is no reason to say, oh, we're going to assess whether you need assistance to be able to make it through 2020, 2021 in terms of liquidity support. We would really like to have an open, honest, and fruitful discussion moving forward. And in the meantime, yes, we are diminishing our costs. We are trying to find ways to increase revenues to the country so that we can be able to sustain. And the details of that, while we cannot share it at the moment, these are being worked on simultaneously as we have these discussions with our kingdom partners and try to seek solutions whereby both of us can, let's call it, have a win.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Dr. Salk, for the question. We now move on to the second round of questions. I would like to invite Lyndon Brown. You have the floor.
Good morning again. The question again is about the Dutch minister between. I would like all of the ministers to say something today, but I'm focusing on the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister. Minister, oftentimes we are saying we are partner in kingdom. What the Dutch has calculate and estimate and study, the Dutch is saying, Prime Minister, the government and parliament are getting too much funds, and they're pleading and they're saying, look, you need to cut on that basis. I know, and you know, ministers, that there are certain people are getting a lot of money when the month comes. Is there right? Whether they work for it or they don't work for it, I cannot say that. But what the Dutch is pleading, the Dutch are saying that they would like to see the people of St. Martin, everybody get a fair share of the economy and the finance of St. Martin. That's what they're actually highlighting. So I know certain stuff, but this is not a platform to speak about it, because the kind of money, especially government businesses, the kind of money that employees getting when the month comes. So they have already know all of these things. So they are concerned about the systemic government. They are asking, can you change? Can you limit your salary? Can you cut in this area? And then because St. Martin is accumulating enough money for St. Martin to survive. But some living wealthy, and while other people, their expenditure is more than their income. So when on this matter, we got to face the facts of the matter and what is the document that St. Martin have for reform. So you can win on this matter.
Lyndon, let's allow the ministers to answer.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Brown. As I mentioned before, that this government is looking at our expenditures. We have reduced expenditures already. We are looking at ways of reducing even more, especially during this pandemic. But not only reducing expenditures, we're also looking at income generating measures. You mentioned a lot of other stuff, but I didn't hear a direct question. You also mentioned systematic government. Government in itself is a system. And I guess we're a new system coming with different changes. In reference to the Netherlands and the conditions that they set, yes, they have put conditions there in regards to reducing the total salary packages within government and government-owned companies, conditions that, in my opinion, doesn't make economic sense in times of a pandemic. But at the end of the day, like Dr. Sak mentioned before, they are one of a few sources of getting income. So we are trying our best to comply. But if you look at other areas in the world, you're not going to see a government asking their government-owned companies to reduce their total salary package by 12.5%. You're not even going to see it in the Netherlands. You're not going to see it in the other Dutch Caribbean islands, the BES, the Bonaire, the Statia. You're not seeing it anywhere else in the world. What you are seeing is governments investing, putting money in the economy. So yes, it's a hard pill to swallow. And the Netherlands have their strategy, and I believe that we should have ours also. So while we are working on meeting these conditions with the Netherlands, we are simultaneously looking at other options for raising money, raising capital, not just for this pandemic, but for the longevity of this country. I believe that for any future pandemic, any future crisis, we should be and we will be more prepared because of what you mentioned from the past, the bad systematic government. Prime Minister?
Yes, I really don't want to continue to repeat myself, but I wouldn't want people to have the takeaway from here that it's a constant blame game. We do have a systemic system of government. We have several new entities which have come on in the past 10 years. We are assessing how these entities can help or hurt us. We know that one of the consensus says that our governments agreed to was, for instance, the CFT for Curacao and St. Martin. As you can see, it is trying to be put in the same way for Aruba at this time. Aruba still has the opportunity to borrow outside of the Dutch government. Of course, seeing their liquidity situation, it is still difficult for them to secure a loan. So that is a natural, let's say, stop for a country like Aruba that has been, let's say, status apart from the kingdom or from the other islands for a much longer time. They have had their autonomy for a much longer time. Now, Curacao and St. Martin has been moving forward with it for the past 10 years. We have had to go through all our financial maneuvers through the CFT. We must have CFT approval. It is a form of higher supervision, which they agreed to in the negotiations back then by consensus. What is being asked of us right now is to increase the supervision without having the long discussions that sometimes took up to 10 years back then, within a few days and months, even though they took several months to write this law. We have sent a counter proposal which meets the same goals that they say they have. So it's not an us against them situation. We are attempting as St. Martin in growing our autonomy over the past 10 years and back from 1954 or 45 when the Netherlands Antilles was separated as a colony and as a, let's say, a country as itself, the 6 islands. There's been a process that has been followed. Can we just go backwards on that process without actually having a discussion? That's why we are asking to separate the discussion. There is emergency funding needed. Some emergency funding is already disseminated through entities such as the Red Cross, etc. We as government must be able to ascertain whether we are actually meeting the needs of all those vulnerable persons. We have had to also accept and swallow, like Minister Finance said, the bitter pill that even as we try to assist more businesses, the conditions did not allow us to do that, and we had to reduce the amount to 60%. So we are doing what we have to do. We have taken as many of the steps that we could take without hurting the people. We have cut the salaries, we have cut the complete employment packages, and are still feeling the pinch of that with our discussions with the unions, and have to finalize the legislation, etc., to be able to make that a systemic change. And some of the proposals put forth by the unions in the discussions also touch, as I mentioned before, on the plans within our governing program. But you cannot change 20 different things at the same time with the same small legislative body that we have in government. It is not an excuse, it is a reality. So I believe we need to be realistic. We need to sit down, agree that these are the funds we need to be able to make it through the month, to survive as we implement some of the reforms that do not require large changes, and then those that require legislative changes that can take up to 18 months, 12 months, or the ones that can be pushed forward quickly in 3 to 6 months. We prioritize those. The BAC department is working on that. The finance department is also collaborating with the legal department to see which ones have to change. And that is the way that we are working diligently to do what needs to be done. We are not shying away from our responsibilities, and we continue to look forward to open and honest deliberations as partners to be able to come to a true consensus.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Minister Edion, as well as Lyndon, for the question. I would like to inform members of the media we are up on time. However, I will allow the last 2 questions. So can we ensure that the questions are very brief? Bibi Shah, you have the floor.
Thank you, Relaika. I'm directing a question here, and I don't know if it's really for the minister, Prime Minister, or if the Minister of TIAT is going to take the question. Prime Minister, can you expound a little bit on the SOALIGA Employers Association that was established? We received a press release. I did a search on the Chamber of Commerce registration. There is no such registration for the SOALIGA Employers Association. Can you also tell us if you know, this is if you know, because I believe you spoke about it once when you said you were waiting on this so that you can appoint members of the board, for example, the SER. Who exactly was consulted by when this association was established? Based on the checks I've made, not one hotels were contacted. There was no contact made for stakeholder meeting, for brainstorming, nothing. I believe the Bankers Association was not called in for advice, but they had a brief meeting just prior to the launch. Can you give us some insight into this association? What's its objective really, and why is it not registered?
Okay, I can't give you any information as to why it isn't registered. I also received notification from it, as you know, and I mentioned here in press briefing, that after meeting with the SER, let's say the Chamber of Commerce was tasked with setting up the Employers Association. I have been updated by them. Another entity was set up by another group of persons. However, as I mentioned before, we had given the mandate to the Chamber of Commerce, and so we are looking at the legality in terms of representation on the SER, and hopefully this can be resolved in this coming week. But we have just received a notification, I believe at the end of last week, from the Chamber of Commerce, and also another correspondence from the other. So there's the SOALIGA as well as the St. Martin Employers Association that have been established, and we as government now will have to ascertain which would have the right to represent on the SER. But I can say that we did have the discussions with the chamber, and they are the ones that were tasked to set this up, and the name of that one is the SOALIGA Employers Association. So I will be looking forward to receiving the final documents, and then I will be able to share that information. But as soon as we have the names, we will be able to finalize the appointments to the said board.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Bibi, for the question. Jeffrey, Dr. Sock-Sockran, you have the final question.
I promise I'll go very quick. This is for Minister Panafleck. I think this is a more of a request than a question. I was wondering if it's possible, we disclose every day the number of tests that we do at the airport. Is it possible to also disclose, as part of that, the number of positive test results that are received on a daily basis from the testing that is done at Princess Juliana International Airport?
Good morning and thank you, Dr. Sock. In working forward to get more information and being able to adapt how to go forward, there are some basic protocols that were adhered before in the ministry, that they are not only looking into it, but we are giving directives for them to be changed. And one of those is also to produce the figures, that the amount of people that are being tested, so that you can do the comparison from the amount of people that are tested, how much percentage is coming out positive. So also from the airport, as you can see, if you look back in your data of before, you wouldn't have seen much of airport. Naturally, you'll say, yeah, the airport was closed. No, the airport wasn't closed all the time. It was closed for a certain time with the lockdown, and then it reopened. But also to make sure that the people understand that the airport right now, at least, it is not significantly of our situation, the information of the airport and the amount of testing is being done. Naturally, we can give you the amount of positives coming from the airport, but if there is hardly any positive coming out of the airport, I cannot give you that. But thank you for the question, and I will make sure to pass it through, so that they also will give, when God's willing, not, but if there's any positive, to pass it on. We are very open and direct, and we give every information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Have a pleasant day.
Thank you, Minister Panafleck. Thank you, Dr. Sock, for the question. Members of the media, the floor is now closed, and thank you for partaking in this morning's meeting. Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, September 9th, 2020. For rebroadcast, tune into St. Martin Cable TV, channel 115, St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM, the official Facebook page of the Government of St. Martin, and the YouTube channel Government of St. Martin. For video on demand, log on to the official government's website at stmartingov.org. On behalf of the Department of Communication and the Government of St. Martin, I'm Relika Roach, and wishing you a pleasant day further.